Okay, no questions. We're going to move right along to state representatives for District 17A candidates, Andrew Falk and Tim Miller, and we will start out with Andrew.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you all for being here. It's really good to see all of you involved, and I want to take the time to thank all the candidates up here too. You know, it's never easy to put yourself forward and run for an office, and so I really do appreciate all the people that are willing to step forward here. It really shows that we have a tremendous amount of talent in our community and a lot of really good people up here, and we're well served by these folks. A little bit about me. I'm Representative Andrew Falk. I currently serve District 17A in the Minnesota House of Representatives, which includes all of Swift, all of Chippewa, most of Renville, and a portion of Candido County. I currently represent this area. I was first elected in 2008, and I represented the old District 20A, which included Swift, Big Stone, Lackawanna, West Napa, Medicine, and Lincoln counties. A little bit about me. I am married. My wife, Marnie, is not here. We have a 10-month-old daughter, and her name is Arya, and it's just incredible. It's a lot of fun right now, and she's at that point in time in her life where she's just able to really take things in like a sponge, and so life is really exciting. I grew up on a family farm north of Murdoch, Minnesota, and I was the 5th generation on that farm, and my daughter is now the 6th generation, and that's really cool to have that opportunity to go and work on that same land and look at it as how it's going to be to go and see her grow up there as well. I graduated from Kirkhope and Murdoch-Sunburg Public Schools, and from there I went on to attend the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Management. I earned a double major in entrepreneurial management and finance. And upon graduation, I came back home and started farming with my family. My family also operates a seed business where we clean and process seeds for sale to farmers, for different companies, and also for export markets and domestic food markets. In 2006, I was able to have the opportunity to work for Senator Gary Kubley, Representative Lyle Kunin, and Representative Aaron Peterson. They were running for re-election in 2006, and I was part of their campaign efforts. In 2008, Representative Peterson decided not to seek re-election, and so there became an open seat, and that's when I ran for that house, the seat in the House. Throughout my time in the House, I've been re-elected in 2010 and 2012. I have been able to build some seniority, which is important. I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the House Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Finance Committee. Excuse me. I also serve on the Agriculture Policy Committee, the Energy Policy Committee, Government Operations Committee, and the Commerce Committee. And one of the things that I think is really important is that Senator Kubley taught us to take a team approach, and that's one of the things I've been able to do with Senator Kubley, of course Senator Kunin now in the Senate, is we're able to carry bills together, to go and pass legislation together, and that's so important because one of the fundamental things about the legislative process is you have to be able to get a bill through both the House, the Senate, and a governor that's willing to sign it. That's one of the things where I have a proven track record of accomplishments. In addition, I've always brought a positive voice. I do not run negative ads. I try to keep things positive, focused on the issues, because I think that's what voters expect and that's what voters deserve. That's one of the things I learned from Senator Kubley. He always carried that public voice, or that positive voice, and really thought of this as public service. So look forward to the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And next up is Tim Miller, and then the rebuttals will talk after that.
Thanks, Roger. And thank you, Chamber. My name is Tim Miller, and I'm running for the Minnesota House of Representatives. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank my supporters that have come to be here, and I really want to thank the supporters who have worked so hard over these past several months to help me in this endeavor. But I want to mostly thank my wife, Sherry, for her dedication helping me with this. It's been a big sacrifice for her. She has had to work 2 jobs so that I could do this. She has taken care of the kids when I could not be there. And most recently, she has had to suffer attack ads on me that were actually paid by her very own union. So her money went towards attacking me. And so she's handled this sort of stuff with grace, and I love her, and thank you very much for being here. A little bit about myself. We have 7 kids and 3 grandchildren. I work for Habitat for Humanity in Wilmer. I do some other work on the side consulting with nonprofits and for-profit companies. I've been in business for myself most of my life, so I understand what it takes to earn a dollar. I understand what it takes to pay people, to keep books, and to market myself. And I think a lot of those things are what I can basically carry into to the State House. I'm an Army Reserve veteran, and I like theater, so I guess that's enough about me. A lot of people ask why it is that I'm running, and there's really two reasons that hopefully will come out in the question and answer session. But number one, I love this community. I want to raise my children here. I have raised them. I want my grandchildren to grow up here. I believe that these communities out here can thrive. A lot of people say, how are we going to make West Central Minnesota survive? I think we can make it thrive, but we got to dedicate ourselves to a better cultivated state for business development. I think we need to let our teachers teach in education rather than control them, and I think our infrastructure out here is lacking. The second reason why I'm running is, quite frankly, my representative does not represent me, and I don't believe that he represents the majority of the people in my district. He has taxed the farmers heavily. He has spent money on things in St. Paul rather than out here, I do not, I'm very clear with this, I do not support the same-sex marriage that passed. More importantly, 65% of my district agreed with that. And from the floor, our representative said, I understand where my district stands, but I cannot stand with them on this vote. He voted against his very people. I also have a problem with, we had an opportunity to end taxpayer funding of abortion, and that was voted down by my representative as well. So where I stand and where Andrew stands is very clear. I encourage you to make the important choice of what's close to you. Don't pay attention to party. Pay attention to what's right and wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And Andrew and Tim know, 1 minute more. You want to develop? Nothing, Andrew? Okay. From the audience, questions directed? Could you please come up to the mics over here, please?
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. I have a question for the DFL candidates as to why we contributed over $400 million to Rochester to improve their streets and their storefronts. I've just been in Rochester the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just interesting. They're falling over themselves trying to figure out how they're going to spend this money.
Who would you want both of them to get up and answer, or Andrew?
Andrew.
Andrew?
Well, thank you to the person, and I usually, think both are questions to both candidates, but happy to take this. I think you're talking about a provision in the tax bill that was for the Mayo Clinic, and one of the things the Mayo Clinic wants to do, they are the largest private employer in the state of Minnesota, and they are actually, as most of you know, one of the most renowned and respected health facilities in the entire world. And they have some resources that they're looking to invest, and one of the things that they were asking Minnesota to do is that if you partner with us, if you help us invest in infrastructure for the city of Rochester, we'll go and make the private investments to go and bring more people and more doctors and healthcare facilities here to Minnesota. One of the things that they had brought up as a potential, if we didn't look at working with them, would be the possibility of investing those dollars elsewhere around the country or even around the world. And so one of the things that I thought was very important was to maintain that one of the highest quality medical institutions in the world in Minnesota, and to make sure that they have the ability to go and invest. And we talked about this, it was a provision in the tax bill, and one of the things when we talk about omnibus bills, you may not like everything, but sometimes you have to compromise and you have to go and take some of the better provisions, with some things that you might not have as much of a comfort level with. But overall, I do think that this is going to be good for the state of Minnesota. It's one of the things that we're going to have to continue to work on. But when we think about this is to make sure that the Mayo Clinic continues to invest money, time, and resources in Rochester. And that basically what it was kind of like tax increment financing, essentially. That's one of the tools we use around here for some of our small communities. So overall, it's one of the things that's going to be good for Minnesota, and it also is going to help the Mayo Clinic, which is, once again, our largest private employer.
Any other questions?
For both candidates, please, what programs would you support for state money addressing weather-related disasters?
Go ahead.
Apologize, I didn't prepare water. Give me this one. Please send me some water. Thank you for your question. And I don't know if this is going to address it, but this is what came to mind. What sort of state money will address disasters out here? There's a provision in the state law by which if there's a disaster, FEMA money is brought in, state money is some matching money. There's different dollars that come in to fix and repair a lot of different things. One of that is power lines and things of that sort with our energy. Out here in west central Minnesota, of course, most of our energy comes from the cooperatives, the electric cooperatives. And we had an opportunity to change the law this last year to where electric cooperatives could be eligible for some of the FEMA funding and state funding should there be a natural disaster and they can fix that. My opponent voted no to that, and he killed that. That could have happened. That's one way that we could spend money. I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking, but absolutely when we are facing natural disasters, we enjoy a very wealthy state. And we need to make sure that the people that need help get it. And so if there's weather-related disasters, we need to step up and make sure that those things are funded.
Thank you for the question. I think this is a really important topic, specifically in the city of Montevideo. It's one of the things that, as you know, we've had some flood issues here. And for the last decade or so, we've really tried to get the final money to finish the levee system in Montevideo. And after a tremendous amount of work, I was able to secure the funding in the bonding bill to actually complete the levee. So that's really good that the city's going to be able to be more protected. And when we look back at like the floods of '98, and even though some of the last couple of years, the amount of money that is spent by the city and by the state to go and battle some of those floods was pretty extensive, in excess of $1 million. And even though some of the watermarks more recently were at the same levels, because the levees had been constructed and because we were more prepared, the cost to battle those floods was significantly reduced. A couple things we did in the last legislative session. We set up a disaster relief fund, basically kind of a prepared day account, I could call it. And it used to be that if we had a disaster situation in the state, FEMA would come in and cover 75% of the cost. We'd have to put up 25% of the cost. Oftentimes it took calling a special session. We actually put money forward into a special revenue or special account so that if there is that federal disaster declaration, we're able to go and use that money in a special account so we don't have to call a special legislative session. One of the things I do support, and I really think it's important for us to focus on, is we have to go on and put, we've got a huge backlog of conservation projects. We've got a huge backlog of wetland restoration projects. All of these things that we can do, investing in buffer strips to go and help slow down water events, to go and retain water on the land, make sure that we have less erosion. All of these things can go and help mitigate and reduce the impacts of some of these severe weather events. And just look at what happened in Randall County this spring. We had huge costs to local communities, costs to local roads and bridges. And there's a number of things that we need to be doing proactively. We'll be more prepared to go and address these things in a proactive manner versus simply reacting. One thing to say, there's a reason why the cooperatives are not eligible to get this money reimbursed for power lines, and it's because they pay patronage dividends. Because they are paying patronage dividends to the people who own the cooperative, essentially that's like you'd be giving them taxpayer-funded money to then go and give directly to the shareholders of the cooperative. The other thing to note too is that we expect our businesses to go and carry different types of insurance. And so our rural cooperative should be covering their own insurance to go and address those needs if they're hit with a disaster.
Thank you, Andrew. One more question, and who is it directed to?
For both candidates.
Okay.
For both, how do you feel about legalizing marijuana for medical use?
Well, there was a law that was passed this last year, and let me first state that the real issue is we want to make sure that we take care of people that need medical help. Okay, I do not want to see young people suffering when there's a remedy that can help them with that. And so, the medical use, the true phrase medical use of marijuana, I fundamentally don't have a problem with. And I think the law that was passed, as best I could see, I think probably took care of pretty much all of the concerns that I had when it comes to, as they call it, the legalization of marijuana. My big concern is how it gets a foothold in the door towards recreational use of marijuana. And a lot of the bills that were written a lot of the discussion was in such a way to where it would have opened the doors for that, and I cannot support that. There is one overall writing concern, which is kind of I apologize, kind of getting into the weeds and kind of nerdy, but understand that by legislatively legalizing the medical use of marijuana, we sidestep the FDA, and we sidestep the safeguards that are put in place in order to make sure that the public is properly administered, some of those things. And that's where my real focus is going to be as this moves forward. Is this being dispensed by pharmacies properly? Is it being prescribed by doctors properly? Those are some of the things that we need to really be careful of, and we really need to watch out for to make sure that this is being used properly. I am not, and I apologize, I am not a supporter of recreational use of marijuana. My family has a track record, or has a background where we have some substance abuse, and I don't like what marijuana does. My wife is a nurse, and she can say from the medical profession with certainty that there are ramifications with this. So I guess I just want to kind of wrap it up by saying, to answer your question directly, I support medical use of things like this, but I hope I described well where my concerns are and where my eyes are going to be open moving forward. Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you for the question. And this is an issue that I think a lot of people in the community know a lot about, just with the Falk family. And that's actually how I came to understand a significant part of the medical marijuana issue. And it's one of the issues that I support. I absolutely support the medical use of marijuana. I do not support the recreational use. And I met the Falk family when they came down lobbying for the passage of medical marijuana because of one of their children had some very, very complicated medical issues. And as I got to know more and more of these families and the stories that they brought forward and the challenges that they faced, I just couldn't in good conscience continue to go and figure out why we would allow these folks to be denied the type of medical care and treatment that they need. One of the things we did with the bill that was passed is we put forward the most restrictive medical marijuana or medical cannabis law in the country. We have 2 manufacturers that will be approved, will each be allowed to operate 4 dispensary sites. I know the city of Montevideo is interested in this, and that's one of the things that I'd like to see developed in upstate Minnesota. I think it's a good economic development tool because it's one of the opportunities where we've got the ability to do it well. The bill that was passed, it has a lot of restriction in it too. Whoever the 2 manufacturers are, they're going to have experience with clinical trials. And additionally, we want to make sure that those people involved they're treating this like a study, like it is. And so that we're using the best medical practices. And to say that we sidestep the FDA, it really isn't an accurate description because other states have figured this out and they've moved forward. And we're trying to take the best practices from those states and move forward as well. I also got to know the Falk family quite well, and that's another reason why this moved forward. The family there, they have a daughter that's now living with parents. One of the parents flies back and forth in Colorado because the youngest daughter is able to get access to medical cannabis. And it's been the only drug that has helped her to be able to function. And I talked to Maria, who was the mother, and she mentioned that her daughter got a report card, and she'd always been in special education. But the teacher said that after she got onto medical cannabis, that Charlotte's Web strain, that her daughter needed to spend more time in the regular classroom. She had to interact more with kids. And when you hear these stories and you understand the life-changing impacts that it can have for certain families, and once again, we want to remember that this is medicine that's prescribed by a doctor, that's overseen by a medical professional. It's not recreational use. If you tried to go and remove access to Adderall or any other types of prescription drugs, I think there'd be huge public outcry. But this is something we're moving forward because for certain instances, for certain patients, they need access to this medicine to be able to live and experience the same quality of life that we take for granted. That's one of the reasons why I was an author of the bill. It's one of the reasons why I was in support of the bill. I went back to this community on a number of different fronts, and I'm excited for the possibility that we're going to see some really good things coming forward and helping a lot of people. And that gets back to one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I really truly believe that politics is about improving people's lives, as Paul Wellstone said.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions? And directed to which candidate?
Both.
Both of them? Okay.
In Minnesota, women work at the majority of the lowest paying jobs. Their salaries are 80% of what men earn. and the elderly women are twice as apt to live in poverty as men. Last year, they passed a bipartisan Women's Security Economic Act, and would you have supported that, or did you support that? And what will you do in the future to ensure that women's salaries equal men's?
Not having read the law, I can't go into the details by any means as to whether it was good or bad. The subject matter that you're referencing, of course, we need to make sure that there is equal pay for equal work, man, woman, religious affiliation, anything. Okay, there needs to be a dedication to that, and I think that there is a role in the state to make sure that safeguards are put in place. So I know that I'm talking in generalities, but it's because I can't say that I sponsored a bill that blah blah, you know. But I want you to know, you asked me what my intention would be, and my intention would be that if there was an exposed situation in which there was disparities, we need to address it in an appropriate way. Now let me put a little bit of framework on that. I don't believe that the state can control all of it. And that's maybe a sad state, but I think that if we start writing laws to try and control all these different things, it's going to be a dog chasing its own tail. And so legislation needs to be very prudent to make sure that it does what it was intended to be. The rules that are set forth in the different agencies and stuff in the state need to make sure that they're doing things that are prudent and appropriate to affect the proper change. A lot of times laws are passed with a big name in front of it and with a lot of emotion, and all the details behind it end up causing more problems than was originally intended. So kind of a long drawn out answer, I apologize, but I want to make sure that you understand that absolutely, whether it be elderly women, anyone, if they are doing work, they should be paid for the work that they are doing.
Another really important topic, thank you for it. The Women's Economic Security Act is one of the pieces of legislation I also authored this last legislative session and moved forward. And I'm actually quite surprised that in 2014 we haven't dealt with these issues before, and why we're finally doing them now, but I'm glad that we have dealt with them. I've got a 10-month-old daughter, and I want her to grow up in a world where she's treated and valued equally as her male counterparts in the workforce. One of the things that the Women's Economic Security Act helps rectify is the fact that women are paid on average about 80 cents on the dollar to every dollar that men are paid. The state is going to go in and have new protections to make sure that vendors, contractors that get state contracts, that do work on behalf of the state, they have to go in and pay women fairly if they're doing the same work as men. Additionally, we're also looking at making sure that women are not passed over for promotions or job advancement because of being women, because they're taking care of kids, because they may be pregnant, because they may have other types of situations with results in their family life. Another thing we did in that act was we also expanded the amount of maternity leave. These are all good things that it's really, like I said, it's kind of surprising that in 2014 they hadn't been dealt with. They've been put off for far too long. But I was very thankful to be able to work with my colleagues in the House to be able to pass the Women's Economic Security Act. I would like to note, though, we had a lot of support for this, but there were pretty significant business lobbying groups that were not exactly supportive and working to go in and water down and to, I would say, kind of push back the progress that we were moving forward. And that was unfortunate because I can't understand why anybody would want to go in and pay a person less just because they're female. And I look at this from the standpoint of middle-class families. When you've got both partners in a family working, wouldn't you want both of them to be paid and valued equally so that that family has more resources coming in and that they're able to better provide for their kids and better able to save for retirement and better able to live that middle-class American dream that we all share? And so once again, I look at the fact that this was really good policy, not just for women, but also for families, because if the woman who's working in the household isn't being paid equally or fairly with the male counterparts, that family is suffering as well.
Go ahead, directed to who?
This is directed to both candidates.
Okay, speak up.
What should be the state's role in funding local government?
this has been my position all along with local government aid is basically what you're referring to, Craig. Okay. I believe there's two true things about our state. Number one, we're a wealthy state, and so we can afford to do the things that we need to do. We're even able to do some of the things that we want to do, and I think that's a great thing. I also think that because of population base, because of other factors, there are disparities in what basically property taxes and some other local taxes can generate in order to fund certain basic services. So what is the role in the state in supporting local government aid? I think there's a very significant role, and I think when the law was originally passed, it served its purpose well. There's certain basic services that we want to have top-notch out in Montevideo, Iowa, just like we would have in Burnsville or somewhere else. Now, whenever you have a great program, it gets people to start putting their hands on it, and it starts shifting all over the place. And there is monies that get distributed unevenly. It kind of loses its focus. There are two parts of local government aid that I have big concerns of right now. Number one, the formula that was in place for a long period of time was shifted now to where over a period of time, the very communities like Montevideo that were meant to receive this aid to offset population and things like that, they're going to be receiving less over time. So it's kind of losing focus of what it was supposed to be doing. The other issue that I have is just like with education, we have a little fun topic called unfunded mandates. There's strings attached with the money. Now I know that a lot of times when money comes, unfortunately, there's going to be strings attached. But you'd like to think that if the strings attached, at least the cost of that is covered somewhere in the money. There are more and more mandates that are happening that the cities are faced with doing certain things that they simply cannot afford to do. And I think that that's a problem as well.
It's a really good question, and I want to say that for the first time, really in about a decade, we actually have money truly going into local government aid because of the budget we passed in the last millennium. Since 2003, local government aid had been cut pretty significantly when we had budget shortfall. And the purpose of why we have local government aid is it's based on a formula and it's a needs assessment. And one of those needs is how old, how much housing do you have over a certain, built over a certain period of time, and how many, perhaps car accidents or traffic lights. There's a number of things that go into it. And so it's always been kind of looking at what the needs are. And this is an area where we actually have to work well with other people around the state. There aren't enough votes simply in rural parts of the state or urban parts of the state, urban parts of the state to have a majority of the votes. So you have to find and build coalitions. And that's one of the things that local government aid does do. And the purpose of that is to help fund local services, but also to keep property taxes in check, to push down the amount of money that people have to pay on property taxes for local services. And that's one of the things that we really brought together a lot of people last session. And even in areas that traditionally maybe hadn't thought about local government aid or been opposed to it, oftentimes suburbs, we wanted to get them on board with what was going forward. And it's one of the things that's incredibly important to rural parts of the state. Look at like the city of Montevideo, city of Granite Falls, they rely on their local government aid to go and help provide those essential services, whether it's plowing the roads in the wintertime, providing police protection, fixing potholes. It's all of those basic essential things. And so I am a strong proponent of local government aid. The reason we were able to pay for this is we had to go and raise some revenue. And we asked the wealthiest 2% of Minnesotans to pay a little bit more. And what that really equates to is if you're a single filer making more than $150,000 per year, you had to pay an additional 2 cents in every dollar above $150,000. If you're a married couple filing jointly, you'd have to pay an additional 2 cents in every dollar above $250,000. And so that's some of the money that we raised, we're able to go and put into programs like local government aid. And it is a really important program because it builds coalitions and brings the state together. And it's one of the things that I've had to work with my colleagues from Minneapolis and St. Paul and from the suburban areas because none of us have the majority of the votes. We have to get 68 votes in the House, 34 votes in the Senate, and a governor is willing to sign the bill to be able to get anything done. And by working together, we're able to go and put dollars in. Another thing, too, that we did in the last session that hadn't been done for a long time was we actually put $10 million into township aid. Townships had previously been relying strictly on property taxes, but the $10 million was able to go and help them keep some of their property tax burden down and also provide those essential services, often which is plowing roads and maintaining township roads.
Thank you, Andrew. You have one more question over here? And who's this directed to? Both of them?
To Representative Falk.
Okay.
While you've been in the House of Representatives, 3 bills dealing directly with abortion have come up for a vote. Bill 1921 would require abortion centers to be licensed and inspected by the state. Bill 2341 requires the physician to be present when an abortion-inducing drug is administered. These 2 bills were to protect the health of the mothers, and you voted no on both of these bills. In 2009, an amendment was proposed in the House to stop the state from using taxpayer money to fund abortions. You voted against this and were willing to make a great share of your constituents violate their consciences. Science says it is human life from conception, and we all know that directly killing an innocent human life is murder. My question is, were you pressured by Planned Parenthood or other legislators or others to vote this way, or did you make these decisions on your own?
Well, I think that this is a fairly clear question, but one of the things to be clear with folks is that these bills and these votes and these amendments that were referenced, they're not supported by the medical community. I think that's important to be clear. And I don't feel that it's right for me to go and decide the medical decisions of another person. And that's why I voted accordingly.
Another question? Directed to
To both of them.
both of them? Okay, go ahead, sir.
There was quite an increase in taxes 2 years ago. And there was also a law passed this last time in regard to voting for $90 million for a house or a place for the senators and representatives to be. And I'm wondering, my question is, why?
I don't mean to be glib, but that's my question too. That's one of the things that I've raised, is in the bonding bill this last year, $1 billion in bonding money was spent. And I believe that we do need to invest in our state with bonding money. Again, as I said earlier, we are a wealthy state, and there is a wisdom in investing in the future. My opponent has even said that. What I have a problem with, and specific to this $90 million building that you're referring to, is it is directly used by state legislatures. When they were pressured, they cut back, and the only thing they really significantly cut back on was they got rid of the parking garage, the one thing that could have been used in St. Paul. In the same, just to put it in context, in the same bonding bill, $90 million was spent on that, and roughly, I might be off by a few dollars, but roughly about $20 to $25 million was spent on roads and bridges. That's something that we should be investing bonding dollars in, is investing in our roads and bridges. Anyone that's driven on the state highways out here, I was up in Kirkhoven a week or so ago, and Highway 12 is just deplorable. The neighborhood calls it a goat trail. And it is. It's torn up tires, it's torn up things, and we are not getting any money out here to repair those things. So no, I don't understand. My question is why? Why did we spend that money?
We do a bonding bill pretty much every legislative session, although the bigger one typically happens in the second year of the biennium. To first clear something up, the reason why we don't spend bonding dollars from the general fund, the general obligation bonds on roads and bridges, is because the Constitution prohibits it. I want to be clear, the Constitution prohibits it. The bonding dollars that we spend on our state highways and our roads and transportation system, that has to come out of the Highway Trust Fund. We can bond up to 20% of that. There is the ability to put money into local roads and bridges. And actually, in this last bonding bill, we had approximately $87 million that went into local roads and bridges. It was the largest amount of general obligation bonding dollars that went to local roads and bridges in our state's history. When we talk about the bonding bill, what's really in there? Flood mitigation, that paid for the levee in the city of Montevideo. It paid for the wastewater infrastructure in the city of Sacred Heart. It pays for the upkeep at our colleges and universities. It pays for investments in rim easements to go and help deal with weather events. So there's a lot of really good things in the bonding bill. That's what we do to make investments in our state. There has been a lot of issue made around the Senate office building. And I think the reason why is because some entities that really, I think, want to kind of muddy the debate, they have to find an issue to kind of stick to, and this is it. The Capitol is going through a restoration, and the Capitol currently houses the majority caucus senators. It was never designed to house the senators. The minority caucus senators are in the state office building, which is where all the House members are. And what happened is when the Capitol is going to be restored, everybody is going to have to move out, and they're going to have to go someplace. And because of ADA requirements and returning space to the public, there's not going to be enough space for all the Senate offices there. And so the decision was made that what is the best use of housing the senators during the restoration? It's not just the senators too. We have to think it's the staff, the nonpartisan people, it's the Secretary of the Senate, it's all the people that make things work. And so it's disingenuous to say that this is just for part-time legislators, because it's for the people who actually do the work year-round down there, the people who do constituent services issues. If we were to rent and renovate space, it would be pretty expensive for a small period of time. The House Rules Committee looked at this pretty extensively throughout the entirety of the 2014 session. And they came to the conclusion that spending $77 million on the office building was the best use of resources. Now, the state office building, which is where my office is, was built, well, at least 80 years ago, and it's still functional. It still does its job well. And so the decision was made that it makes a lot more sense to go and invest in a facility that's going to last hopefully 100 years, and it's going to be a permanent place for the senators to get them all under the same roof. So often we hear people complaining about how Democrats and Republicans can't work together. In this case, if we can at least get them in the same building, they can talk to each other. I think that's going to make the process a lot better. And the reason this is moving forward is we have a beautiful Capitol. Let's not forget that. We have one of the most amazing Capitol buildings in the entire country. And we have to take care of it. We have to maintain it. We haven't had, the willpower to really do the necessary work. The roof leaks, and we've got marble falling off the exterior. And so we had to go and do that full comprehensive restoration. And because of that, we all have to move out of there. And I think that's a good thing, because it's going to allow that building to be restored to how Catskillsburg intended it. But in that process, we still have to find a place for the senators. And this was the lowest cost option, and it's going to be the best cost option for the taxpayers moving forward.